Hello, welcome to another screencast where this time we'll be discussing here the stomach, but focusing down here, whoops, I'm going to do this, focusing down here on the regulation of the mechanical digestion here in the stomach. In a previous screencast I had addressed all of this already in stomach 1, so this is stomach 2 here. So the regulation of digestion is controlled by the hypothalamus and the brainstem centers, sort of in 3 phases or 3 parts here. The first part is known as the cephalic phase, and simply just like the taste, the smell, or even the thought of food, or some sort of tactile sensation of food in the mouth. And again, this tactile doesn't have to be actually food. It could be like a rubber band or something that's not food. A pebble, a stone will stimulate the mouth, stimulate the production of saliva there. So via the medulla oblongata. So over here in the diagram here again we see taste, smell, or thought of food, and this taste or smell involves chemoreceptors in the nose, in the mouth, right, in the taste and smell, olfaction there, and then also some sort of, or just thought of food, with again the tactile sensation sends impulses from here, the cortex, right, this cerebral cortex, to the medulla oblongata, and then from the medulla you have action potentials that are sent down the vagus nerves. Now here's just a review here of cranial nerve number 10. So this is cranial nerve 10 here, the vagus nerve, and again you see that you're going to have both the blue here is going to be afferent, right? That is action potentials toward, right? And then the red here is going to be efferent, and that is action potentials away from the central nervous system. So in this case we have the vagus nerves, and we're going to have the efferent fibers delivering action potentials to, in this case, the glands of the stomach here, right? So the cells of the stomach. And so what actually ends up happening is you get action potentials here, right, carried via the vagus nerve, where the enteric plexus neurons are activated, and that means that you just have action potentials going to those cells there, and stimulate 2 things here. One, secretion by the parietal and the chief cells, and again, so this parietal and the chief cells here will be again producing the hydrochloric acid and the pepsinogen, respectively, pepsinogen, right? And then also will stimulate gastrin and histamine. Histamine not discussed in the other one, but we're going to focus here just on this gastrin. Gastrin being released, and again, this is a hormone, right? And so the hormones histamine and gastrin released into the circulation here, into the bloodstream, and then that gastrin will actually stimulate secrete more secretions by the parietal and chief cells. So you have action potentials from the vagus nerve, specifically activating parietal and chief cells, and then the gastrin that gets into the bloodstream also feeds back and stimulates the parietal and chief cells, as well as, not mentioned here, as well as the mucus cells. We'll have mucus cells there secreting mucus into the stomach there. And so that is the cephalic phase. Right? The gastric phase involves first off here the distension of the stomach, and so that is as food comes into the stomach, that stomach is going to stretch, and so as the stomach stretches, as we see over here, there are stretch receptors, right, and activates this parasympathetic reflex. Right? The parasympathetic reflex, again, parasympathetic nervous system here, vagus fibers here. They are going to send in action potentials. So here we have vagus nerves, and again, this is going to be the afferent pathway, and afferent fibers stimulated there to the medulla. Medulla then sends action potentials via the efferent fibers, efferent parasympathetic fibers back here. And as we saw on the previous screen, For the previous slide, efferent action potentials here, of course, cause histamine and gastrin release, right? And then that gastrin feeds back here and will stimulate the mucus and chief and parietal cells, right, to be secreting. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I kind of just skipped over because I was excited, I guess, about talking about the vagus nerve. But this distension here, these mechanoreceptors, these stretch receptors, also cause the mucus and chief and parietal cells to release their secretions into the stomach. And so this makes sense, right? As food comes in, you want to be, chemically digesting it. So all these actions make sense there. Right? The final phase here would be kind of like, all right, how does this all stop? Like, how is this negatively regulated, or how is this down-regulated? Right? And this has to do with chyme actually entering, acid chyme entering the duodenum down here. And so here we see, again, the stomach up here and the duodenum down here. And so when this acid chyme gets into the duodenum, what happens is now, via the vagus nerves that are hooked up to the duodenum, here we have afferent pathways, or afferent fibers are signaled. That sends a signal to the medulla, and then the medulla via efferent fibers, efferent sympathetic fibers here, sends impulses back here, and that stimulation actually decreases the gastric secretions. So this is all triggered by, first off, these local reflexes. The local reflexes meaning that the stomach is sort of emptying, right? You get some backwards flow here, right? The stomach churning. As the stomach is churning, that's going to then sort of stop those secretions. But the main stimulus here is going to be this acid chyme entering the duodenum, right? And so that then feeds back via this vagus nerve system here. The other thing that happens, and we'll talk about this a little bit more detail when we do the small intestine, but the small intestine is going to be the cells of the duodenum lining right here will secrete secretin and cholecystokinin, and both of these, this cholecystokinin is also just abbreviated CCK for easier reference. So cholecystokinin, CCK, both of these are hormones. And again, when acid chyme enters the duodenum, these two hormones, secretin and CCK, go into the blood stream, and they will then inhibit any secretions by the mucus cells and the parietal cells and those chief cells. And so we then shut down the production of of the gastric juices in that way. Okay? So, just a quick little screencast there, some classic regulation physiology here, describing and explaining the regulation of the mechanical and the chemical digestion in the stomach, involving the vagus nerves, involving the medulla, involving the cerebral cortex, involving hormones, right? So we have neural as well as hormonal responses there, right? Hormones as well as neural controls there. Okay, thanks a lot. Bring your questions to class.